Hello and welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. Often when joinery business owners are looking to expand their tool set, they'll look at more advanced lean manufacturing processes, and a big part of that is the 5S methodology. On today's episode, Nigel and Aaron go over what is 5S and how to properly sustain 5S within your business. If you have any questions about today's episode, be sure to jump on over to the Joinery Business Hub on Facebook. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Hi everybody, welcome again to the Joinery Business Podcast. My name's Nigel Newman from the Joinery Coach, and I'm being joined today by Aaron, our teammate, another fellow coach at the Joinery Coach. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit around workplace organisation methods. Some may know this as 5S, but we're not going to talk about the whole process today. We're going to really focus on the sustaining part, often seen as the challenging part or the hardest step to keep 5S going once you've implemented some good organizational techniques in and around your workshop. How do we actually keep that going? It's actually a lot simpler than what people think. I think that's sometimes why we often skip this step or forget about it. For those who aren't familiar, 5S, just a quick big background. 5S is a best practice method used in many, many businesses around the world that really just keeps everything orderly, visual, easy to find, easy to put back, and is a 5-step process to approach a work area that might be chaotic, messy, no real routines around it, and provide a very clean, organized workspace. Typically for a group of people, you wouldn't necessarily do this for an individual contributor, like someone just working on their own. But certainly as you go into a shared workspace, this becomes really important for efficiency, safety, productivity, and also teamwork. Just getting the guys to agree on things as a team, having one way to set things up and be in agreement around that. So every person doesn't have their own set of tools hidden in their toolbox because they don't really like the environment and they don't want to share things, because they're normally a bit worried what will happen if they do that. So Aaron and I have just been on a bit of a road trip with a few clients implementing the first 3 S's, which are the very physical aspects of implementing 5S. And these are known as sort, set, in order, and shine. And typically what you do is you go to a chaotic area, you remove all the unneeded things that aren't necessary in that particular work zone, just leaving the things that are needed to do the job. And then you put those things back, but you make sure they're visual, easy to see, easy to identify. So a label or color code, can be a foam cutout, anything that shows where that thing goes. And more importantly, when it's missing, you can see that it's missing. And then the last of the first 3 S's is the shine, to create that new standard. So have it at a certain level of cleanliness and order so you can create a photographic standard or visual standard that can then be maintained. So I don't think we have any clients that haven't done a really good job on that, either at the start of the program or periodically through the program. What often happens though is it looks great. We get some nice photos, probably a bit like the one behind me, pretty orderly. It's a busy factory, but everything has a sense of order to it. There's lines on the floor. There's clarity about where things go. And then 3 months later or 6 months later, it's kind of all slipped back. There might be some areas that are kept nice and other areas that have just gone back to being a bit chaotic. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you avoid that? How do you avoid that slippage once you've set something to a new standard from deteriorating backwards into chaos again, which then normally results in a boss or a supervisor or a manager going, hey, come on, guys, this is terrible. Let's stop and clean it all up and get it organized again. Aaron, just on your journey around 5S, you probably would have felt some big benefits when you did do the kind of sort, set, and shine activities.
Yep.
And I know the teams feel good when they do that because they suddenly go, oh, great, my place looks great now and I can find things and it's orderly. What did you feel were some of the challenges to keeping that in order? Did you find that did tend to slip back in certain areas? And if so, what were some of the things that now that were probably missing or were challenging to do to keep it at that level?
Yeah, so look, I think it's very challenging to keep it at that level. It sort of lasts for about a week, I would recommend, and then you slowly start to see it fall off. Obviously I could have been a lot better in going around every day and checking that it was always returned to that. even just simple things like having a photograph of what it looked like. We only actually had a photograph of one work area, which was a workbench. All the other areas, we never thought to do that or never did that, or, it fell down or something along those lines. So, yeah, I do feel that, a photograph to show people how it goes back in that order is also very helpful. But one thing I did do to help combat that, because, I just lacked the time, and I suppose not so much the time, just being able to make that time of an importance that it needed to be. So yeah, like we made out like a team leader checklist. So the team leaders had a checklist that they followed, which they had then in turn on a Friday had to hand that into the production manager. So and part of his checklist was to make sure he got the team leaders checklist. But yeah, so, they would check the work zones in the area that had the 5S with the visual photos. Then the production manager would check that. And then on a Monday, the guy, the production manager had Monday until 9 a.m. to have it to me to then review to say that we had 3 sections. So 3 checklists were filled out. I found when that process was working and we got that into place and started really enforcing that got done all the time, it made a fairly substantial difference to the time frame that the 5S is staying for. I wouldn't say it was perfect because, everyone gets busy and that's the last thing they think about. But yeah, I think over time that would have graduated to being a lot easier, and I think we would have been able to sustain it. Unfortunately, it was probably something that we only did in the last 6 months. So, yeah, we sort of got to a point where we would last quite a few months without it. The last time we would last quite a few months and everything would be back in place. So, yeah, I do think it is something that takes time to get. But, yeah, like to me, that was a very simple way of being able to do it from my point of view and know that it was done. But also the other guys had a little bit of accountability as well. So that made them want to be able to do it as well.
Yeah. I think, a couple of things you said there that really resonated with my journey in particular was because I think you said it a couple of different ways, but the last way you said it was really good. So you said, it wasn't until I didn't make time for it, I didn't understand the importance of making the time for it. Because it is as simple as when you're a leader, people pay attention to what you do, not what you say all the time, but definitely what you do.
Yeah.
So you can, this and this and this and this, but then they're watching you. All right. And if you say, hey, we're going to do 5S, make sure you clean the bench at the end of the day, but you never ever go out and check. More importantly, it's not to tell them off for not doing it. It's nothing like that. It's actually to encourage them and explain and reinforce the why. Why is it important? Boss? Why do you have to? Surely it's better just to keep working on the job right up until the minute, right? And get the job out the door. And I would always say, yeah, but if we lose something at the end of the day, and we don't know, we didn't put it back, so we didn't realize it was missing or misplaced. We come in the next day or the next shift. First thing we do is looking for that thing. Yeah. So you're not saving any time by not putting it away. You're creating a bigger time trap because tomorrow now it's a whole 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours since we were at work and we've forgotten. Oh, I think I left it over there. I think I put it down over here. The end of shift is more in the fresh memory. We can all stop, have a quick look for it and retrieve it and put it back. So it's really about keeping our efficiency and our certainty that everything's there when we need it. And if we're not out there reinforcing, it's a new process for us people to clean or return to a standard at the end of the day, make it look like the picture, like you said. If we're not out there saying, no, close enough is not good enough, it's got to be to the standard. We're trying to pursue a level of discipline or accountability or excellence, whatever word you want to use. And that requires consistency first. Consistency for anything that we do. And as soon as we tell the guys, hey, don't worry about the cleanup today, get the job out, that's us undoing that consistency for them. And then we can't expect them tomorrow to jump back and do 5S when we've just told them it's actually it's not important. It's more important to do this other thing. So yeah,
and that's something that can really derail the 5S very quickly and for a long. So you might have been doing it really well for for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then you go ahead and do something like that. Well, then straight away that 6 months has been wiped out.
Yes.
And I think the learning journey and the importance journey then takes a lot longer.
Yeah, I mean,
because you've already shown once that it's not important when things get tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard thing, right? It's easy to turn around when things get difficult or easy to go, hey, drop that, do what we've always done, rush, overtime, whatever. And that's actually why, and when you look at why a lot of lean journeys aren't successful or they take really, really long periods of time, like way longer than they should, it's actually because they keep restarting. They get to a certain level, then something happens, they go back to the old behaviors and all that learning and that importance that we were starting to place around new processes gets washed away. And that's why 5S, although, it's really about, we should always have a tool based on a problem. So you wouldn't start with 5S if you had a place that looked like behind it was really slick and organized, because that's not the initial problem they're going to have. But if you go into a lot of, joinery woodworking shops, they are pretty messy. There is tons of sawdust all over the place. It isn't focused on cleanliness or organization. It is a focus on rushing. So yes, 5S is typically a tool we want to start with. But for me, what do you learn with 5S? We were talking about skills matrix in the other podcast. You're actually learning consistency, and you're learning how to create standards. It's two things that 5S teach you really well once you get your head around it. Because without standards, you can't improve. And 5S is the first thing, is to create those basic standards around how we want to lay things out in the shop and where we want to keep things that we use all the time. So don't expect perfection either. You might set up some standards that might not be in the right place. And if you're reviewing that regularly, and we're going to talk about these two steps in a moment, sustain and standardize, only when you're reviewing the changes that you've made and going, is it actually working? Well, it looked like it was going to be closer and easier to use. Maybe there was an unintended consequence. Maybe the move we've made or the rearrangement we made or the standard we created actually created a bit of a problem for someone else. I actually saw that in one of our workshops the other day. We had a team that was very enthusiastic. They did come up with a change halfway through the project, but it was a good idea. They had a large shelving unit. They said, actually, we can cut it in half. We can reutilize half the shelves because we've kind of thrown away so many things we don't need. We'll have this spare shelving unit. We'll put it over in the assembly area and have all the assembly-based tools basically on that shelving unit rather than over here, 15 meters away from where they're needed. Now, the problem was there was some equipment stored in that similar area, which they kind of just pushed out the way. And that equipment belonged to another team leader in the business who was actually not involved in the workshop at the time. So when they saw that their stuff had been moved without communication, without somewhere to put it, they were rightly so quite upset. It's another part of understanding about when you do these projects, it's good to at least let people know what you're doing and put some kind of containment around what can and can't be done. So when we talk about standardize, which is the fourth S, what we're really talking about is, okay, we've done this nice, overhaul of an area. We've labeled it, we've organized it, it's visual, it's got everything we need in there, at arm's reach or within a couple of meters of where we need it. Great. How are we going to keep it in place? Well, the standardization is that step. So what's the checklist and who's going to do it? So something as a workbench, we might say, hey, at the end of each day, that might be the agreement we make. At the end of each day, we want everything returned per the picture or per the new standard. So we hardware away, parts back on the trolley or the trolley in the footprint. My tools either up on the shadow board or in the area where we've agreed to put them. Could be in holsters under the lip of the bench. My personal tools, it could be back in my box. But we have to have a clear standard that's visual, not verbal, not in someone's head, visual, to return it to. And typically I say if you have a photo, write on the photo the time of day or the condition when that standard should be returned. If it's a machine, sometimes you might say after use. When you finish cutting your job on the machine, return it to this picture. If it's a workbench that I'm working on all day, they might say at the end of the day, 10 minutes before the end of the day, 10 minutes to return it to the standard. And there might even be a small list there, which means what? Sweep the floor, tools away, screws and hardware back in its box. So it'll be some simple instruction, only a very few words, just to make sure that everything in the picture, the standard picture, is understood what you need to do. So the first thing is the standard. That's really clear about what we've got to do and when we've got to do it. The second part of standard is who's going to check that. Now, it's typically the supervisor of that team is going to check at that time that everybody's returned their stuff to the photo. If they haven't, then they've let them know, hey, I couldn't find belt sander. Someone's taken it, hasn't been put back. Now, at least the team leader's aware or the manager's aware, so he can take that on, determine how urgent that is and go look for that or find it. Or if it's not been able to be found, at least he's aware of any job that might be affected by not having that tool. And he's now got that information. So there should be, and this is where you really need the 5S board, something that has those routines written on it, something that has a way to track whether that condition was met Monday to Friday. So we have a simple 5S tracking tool that's just a 30-day tracker with a red or green thing that you color in each day. And that's exactly what that's for. So you have your agreed standards, you have your set time that you're going to check that they've been returned to that standard. Some might be end of day, some might be end of the week. Some might be after each job's been completed. So we're going to check those areas, check those conditions are met. And if it's to the standard, great, it's green. If it's not to the standard, we want to find out why. The guys on the bench might go, hey, great job, awesome standard, we love it, but you didn't give us any cleaning equipment. You didn't give us a dustpan brush, you didn't give us a vacuum. So actually, no, we couldn't sweep the floor and we couldn't brush down the bench. All right, cool. We'll get that for you, and then let another go tomorrow, and we'll get that daily status to green. So standardization is creating the routines, cleaning rosters, whatever those agreements are, for someone to check that the standard is being met on a daily basis. And then there's no issues, achieving that standard. The last step, sustain, is typically a next level up. So the standard checks that are done each day, typically a supervisor or a production manager in a small team. The sustain step is the auditing step, typically. So that's where we want really as high a level of ownership in the business involved in that step as possible. Why? Because again, if you see the owner walking around and he's involved in the audit, or he's involved in, maybe he's coming down to recognize the guys when they're implementing the next improvement in 5S, there's got to be some high level involvement around that step, the auditing process, or implementing a change or reviewing a change, because then they suddenly see why it's important. Hey, the owner actually cares about this. He's actually down it, because the owner should care about efficiency and should care about safety. If you want an effective business, those are two things you need. And this is the process that helps you realize those outcomes or get to those outcomes. So, on the audit sheet I was given once when I was at a large company that was fairly mature around this stuff, one of the audit questions in sustain was, a senior manager has been on the audit walk with you this month. And it was a yes or no. And it was the heaviest weighted question in the sustain bit, because it was cultural. If he's down here with you doing it, A, it'll get done. B, he's staying close to the process, he's learning a bit about it, and he's engaged with the team. C, it's sending the message that this is a business process. We actually need to keep this going. And then as a senior manager or an owner of the business, I'd want to see that audit sheet up on the whiteboard or the 5S board, with a score written up and some actions coming off the back of it. And then I know that my team's doing the whole process. They've got the daily checks, they've got the visual board showing me those checks are happening or not, and then what actions are happening. And I can see the audit loop, which is typically monthly or bi-monthly. I can see that that's being done consistently. Then I'm into recognition. Hey guys, show me the next area. What's your ideas? I'm just supporting them following that process. I'm not telling them what to do. They're using the process to make their work areas more efficient, safer, more visual. And I should feel that when I walk through the area. Even if I'm not in the business very often, or I'm not in the work areas, even I should be able to see how to find things and put them back. It should be self-evident to even someone who's not familiar with those work areas. Aaron, just on the sustain step, just very quickly, I think we're almost wrapping up this particular podcast, but on the sustain step, I know when we were out on site last week, seeing some clients, was there anything new in there or things? So I know we don't have a lot around the sustain step in our module currently, although that will get updated. Do you think a daily tracker would have been something that would have been helpful?
Yeah. I think a daily tracker is a good one. It's sort of, and I like the fact that it follows like the safety cross tracker. I just think it makes it very visual, easy to check. And, if you're someone who is going to do like a monthly audit with the production manager, if you're the owner or, the hire manager or something like that, it becomes something then that you can do very quickly at a glance. Let's face it, majority of people would walk past it, at least once or twice a week. So, it's something that you can quickly do at a glance that makes it really, really simple to understand. And it's literally 2 seconds just to put a bit of color on the box. It's not a hard process to do. So, yeah, to me, I think something to track that it was getting done. And everything, whether all the areas that you've got done currently, I suppose that's a good tip. Don't start and go, we need to have the whole thing done. If you've only got one space done, well, that's the one that we'll start the tracker on. And, and start from there. And if you can see all green, you alone will have a really good feeling about knowing that something's being sustained throughout the business.
And it's that old adage, right? It's the old saying is that the standard you walk past is the one you accept. Once you start to get these standards into your work areas, they need to be self-evident that even when you walk past, even if you're not familiar with the guys creating those standards, that that, hey, if there's a footprint on the ground and the trolley's sticking out by a meter, even that, hey, I'm meant to just tuck that back into the footprint because it keeps the walkway clear or it keeps an access pathway clear. So there for a reason. It's not just there for following for no reason. The standards are there for a reason. So things don't get lost, misplaced, and we end up double up or triple ordering something, that the areas are safe to get in and around. They're all there for a purpose. But again, don't be expect to be perfect. I say expect a few reds when you first start. There are going to be days you forget. There'll be days you even forget to color in the tracker. I've been there. I've done that. That's why having the tracker up is important, because if the owner walks past and just looks at the tracker and just sees that they've forgotten to color in the last 3 days, you can stop and ask a question. Hey, do you need any help with the 5S tracker? Are you covering off in your morning meeting? Are you having time to look at those standards? Okay, if the answer is no, let's work out how do we make sure you understand it's important, and then how do we make sure you have the time to follow up on that kind of stuff. It's a fantastic tool for teaching this stuff in a fairly safe way. Meaning, if you forget to do the 5S tracker, okay, it's not like forgetting to do health and safety actions or delivery action. They have immediate consequence on the business, the customer, or an individual's safety and well-being. So 5S is an area that you can safely learn these new skills of consistency, follow up, and creating a new routine in yourself. It's always hard with management because they always think, hey, I'm all over the place. I've just got to react to everything. The whole purpose of bringing these processes in causes less reaction. It's transition. But we've got to acknowledge there's certain things we need to start to be consistent around ourselves. And this is a great kind of learning platform to come off of. All right, Aaron, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming towards the end of time. Thanks, everybody, for listening in today. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time.